Hi, everyone. I'm Jude Hotep, the goddess astrologer and alchemical initiatrix. That is a soul coach. I'm here with Lira Kay. We are going to have an amazing mega discussion today. So we're discussing the divine feminine, divine masculine. We're discussing the patriarchy and what we're infiltrating and dismantling from the inside out. I'm so excited. If you don't know much about me, I'm an astrologer and a soul coach, meaning I work with women to work with their empowerment, their money, and their visibility. And Lira Kay here has been doing work since she was 17 years old. She's world renowned, and she is just a mega influence on really helping a lot of people, particularly in the corporate world, move away from the old paradigms and step into their incredible power. So, Lira, tell us more about what you do.
All right, my name is Lira Kay, and I'm a founder of course, Meaningful Trends, 111 Hills Conference, School of Inspired Life, which is a billion-dollar skill set school, which is really talking about skill set that I think is the most important one, which is the skill of having faith, having that confidence, having that belief in yourself. And of course, on the side of that, all sorts of spiritual gifts. And spiritual gifts, I call them spiritual gifts because they are birthed out of the life that we lived. We are not specifically in control of them. We were not, on a human level, we didn't choose to live through our traumas or through our life, but this is what we got, and we coped with that. But behind those coping mechanisms, those are the spiritual gifts that we've got. And I think if you allow yourself to embrace that, heal, you will become, you will have that skill set that is very unique to you and is very, very special. And this is why the training school is really helping people to open up to those gifts and take them to the world, change this whole human existence for better for everyone, not just for ourselves.
Yeah. What are you finding with men compared to a decade ago to now? Like, what has changed with them that your experience is informing you?
With men, what am I seeing? I'm seeing, I think, because of the, I think since Me Too movement, which is a really great movement, I think, because of how much abuse there is. And, as myself, as you mentioned, I've been working since 17 years old. And since in my 20s, I became a psychotherapist. So I've been working a lot with trauma, especially abuse, childhood abuse, sexual abuse, all sorts of things like that. So unfortunately, it happens much more than we think. It's always been happening. And in the past 10 years, we started talking about it openly, and it became a sort of a mainstream. And I think because of that, partially because women started having a voice and talking about it, but also because of so much unspoken hurt and unhealed trauma, we're having a kind of an attack on men as well. Obviously, I mean, it's kind of natural, but I think what I'm seeing is happening in men, generally, I'm seeing a lot of men are being scared right now just to be themselves, to express masculinity. Masculinity would, of course, include a lot of those I would say a kind of domineering traits that are so threatening for women, especially women who had been abused, who had experienced loss of power. That's one of the, if you're looking at from psychotherapy point of view, it's one of the post-traumatic syndromes is people who had experienced abuse would seek control, would seek safety. And of course, so what I'm seeing is that a lot of men are confused about how to behave with women. And as me working with CEOs who are men, I'm seeing a lot of that kind of misunderstanding of what masculinity even is.
Right. And I think that's such an important, I think that's such an important point, because I think that all of us things are changing and shifting. And it's not that masculinity, there's anything wrong with it. I don't know from a woman's about you, but from a woman's perspective, I love a masculine man, but the divine masculine is present. There's just a presence of masculinity. It's not having to prove it. It's not having to be control or power over or domination over. And I think that's the tough thing that that men had to survive in the patriarchy, women had to survive in the patriarchy, and so we took on this like damaged masculine of wanting to have power over, control over. How do you see that showing up? Are they talking? Are the men you're working with talking about that dynamic at all?
Absolutely. Yeah, because mainly I'm working with leaders, right? So those are men who are in a very, high status position, and obviously naturally maybe more assertive, right? So we're imagining that people who would succeed in this world, including women, would be the ones who are more confident, more competent, more sort of out there, willing to put things at risk in a way. And I actually wanted to ask you almost about the definition of masculine and feminine before we dive deep into it. But, let's say very kind of superficially, traditionally, we're looking at those traits as assertiveness and that kind of straightforwardness as masculine, right, traits. So I'm seeing that as being divine masculine. However, control issues, insecurities, and then domineering, competitiveness, not even competitiveness, but let's say desire to put somebody down, all those kind of, I would say, narcissistic sort of representations of that masculine being also there. And I often talk in my workshops about difference between power and control. And I say the worst thing is to have as a leader, obviously in corporate world, or really wherever, if it's your husband, it's the same thing. The worst thing is to come across of somebody who has control but doesn't have power, doesn't have actual authority, but they are just there to restrict, control, put rules upon you, put all of that stuff upon you through force, through abuse, through all of that stuff, which is like, this is the worst thing. And I think this is why we need so much healing, because it doesn't matter whether it is a masculine or feminine who is in control at the moment. If they don't have real authority or power, we are dealing with something very unpleasant and something we just really feel like I really want nothing to do with it. And I think you mentioned before something about narcissists, and I've studied that a lot. It's a very narcissistic sort of typical traits where people are given up on sort of looking for validation from other people, looking sort of given up on trying to please anybody, right? Which is in itself, it's like, if you want to live in a society, you have to relate to people, you have to please people, not from this place of fear and or poo me, I have to please people, but more like, well, we're in it together, let's cooperate, let's co-create, let's
cooperation, versus like
the kind of like, I'm just scared and I'm pleasing you, I don't have boundaries because I'm afraid to lose you, right? All of those really
background beliefs,
traumas that are really informing that kind of controlling behavior. So so there's lots to talk about that. I'm really, really excited to talk about this with you. So let's continue. Give me some more.
I love what you're saying about, the power versus control. It's very conflated. People don't understand the difference. I think we are pulling apart all of these things in the culture right now in society. I think one of the things that's also really important that a lot of women don't know is that we set the precedent for what is appropriate standard of conduct and behavior. There's this show that someone pointed out to me. It was really funny. It's Big Brother. I don't really watch TV, but it was a different one where they brought all the women in first, and they kind of set an environment and a culture up of where they didn't tolerate the alpha male coming in and domineering and controlling and separating the women and doing all of these psychodramas and psychodynamics. And so when the men came in, they didn't tolerate it. When fights broke out, it didn't last long. It was broken up immediately, and these arguments were squashed. It was really interesting how the women set up this beautiful dynamic. And it was obviously a very unique group of women. I don't think every group of women would have necessarily set that dynamic. And so I think it's interesting with men is that they were taught not to have emotions. They were taught not to have the divine feminine principle within them and have the access to that themselves. And so this power versus control there's so much of the patriarchy, which the patriarchy is a very triggering word to the divine masculine. We need a better word. But what is the word that really says what we're talking about here? This old established way that really only benefits a very few, and usually white men, and usually only men, and usually men with money. And it's the rest of us, men and women, are kind of have to make it and be in this world, and women went into their damaged masculine. So I think what's interesting is about the damaged masculine, that we're finding that needs healed, but within women and men.
100%. Oh my gosh, you just literally just said yeah, that's the truth. I think yeah, it's very, because I wonder, in my life, and it's been long, like I'm 50 years old, right? So this year, so it's and it's been tough too. So I've encountered many different type of men, and I wanted to say, oh my gosh, I was so lucky, right, to have in my personal relationships I had, it's my second marriage, but both men that I've encountered were just wonderful, beautiful souls, and luckily I had maybe the best sort of it, right, of what men I believe need to be. My first husband was he was amazing. Unfortunately, he died. Took his own life, by the way. So it's very interesting about that depression that can come on whether you're. I think it's. I think statistically speaking, there's more men that commit suicide before 45. So it was like that kind of age. It was very tragic. And I was a widow with 3 kids, and then I met my second husband, who took me in with 3 kids and brought them up. And we have 5 daughters. We had extra 2 babies, but to me, I always felt like I'm lucky enough to see that divine masculine, in kind of my own personal relationship. Oh, I can't hear, you're muted.
And live it and come together as a partnership together.
Yeah.
And really have that experience. And I don't know that how many women across the board have that experience, because I think that there's plenty of men that are good, plenty of women that are good, but they're not necessarily connected into that divine masculine feminine version of themselves. They're kind of in the culture, in the over culture's status quo, prescribed life.
Yeah, but when I'm thinking in my kind of earlier encounters of men who I would say, always like keep away from that, that's like not my element, right? I've seen that kind of toxic masculinity. I was growing up in 90s in Soviet Russia. I'm from Estonia actually, but was part of Russia at the time. And I don't know if you know about that. That's been quite a wild time. It's kind of a revolution time where it was kind of freedom. Let's just, but at the same time, the currency collapsed. We had a big economic relapse, and there was just no jobs. And now you saw all those boys my age, I was 18, 17, 18, 19, 20, something like that at that age. And I'm looking at all those boys coming from war from Afghanistan, and you could see what's happening to the masculine, right? It's that first idealistic, we are the protectors, we are the, we are here to, to build up, women, do the country, everything. And then suddenly all of it collapses. And what I saw is that majority of at least my generation boys went into that toxic masculinity because they were very well trained, coming from military, having access to guns, having access to, to trainings and knowing how to be. They basically became criminals, right? There's a lot of and that's what when I remember encounter with those boys, right, I know where they come from. I know that they were all good boys until something happened to them, until they've lost the purpose, until they've lost that kind of ideal. What are they really doing in this life? And I see that when you naturally, through your own personal trauma, maybe collapse into some kind of darkness, and some men just go down, and don't survive that, and others come up with that very toxic response, that violence, and what violence with whom? Not only against each other, but against somebody who is weaker than them physically, which is women. And I
Yeah.
saw a lot of violence, like I saw, unfortunately, and that is like, I remember that time and really feeling like, oh my gosh, like what is the world I'm living in? Like, what are those boys? And it was just sad. And
It's
now
amazing that you had trust in being able to be with men, and it's an interesting experience
took a lot of
that you've had.
therapy. Took a lot of therapy because no,
Uh,
I didn't mention that I've been also, you know, a healer myself and spiritual teachers. There's a lot of spiritual work, but also psychotherapy training. And as you're a psychotherapist, you have to go through therapy. So there was a lot of healing around that, around issues with my own father, who was, you know, a famous artist. I'm sure with some narcissistic traits. I'm pretty sure. I mean, famous sort of male, very popular with women, had tons of marriages, lots of kids left behind. So it's a kind of a mess of a, you know, masculine sort of
yeah.
role model.
And it's funky because with sex too, it's that people do have their own desires to be in open relationships, mini relationships, pansexual, all of these different types of possibilities. And so I think it's now coming into the culture for there to be a plethora of relationship options, and the culture is coming along to more acceptance of that. But then there's also the dark side and the debauchery, and it's like saying that you want to be in monogamous when you really don't, and saying
Exactly,
just the lack, you know, the lack of honesty, and it being so taboo. And then it brings out the damaged masculine again, it brings out the wounded feminine again, and then we have the problems in relationships. And it's like, why can't you just, we can all just be really clear about, I want many relationships, I want one, I want these types of relationships or open relationships, because now it's becoming more and more widely acceptable. And I think the more we go in that direction, the more people can be real about what their desires are. And I think one of the big issues is that many people didn't get a chance to explore. They were shut down as children, as teenagers, on the exploratory path, and not given questions to really start to question, like, do I want to do this? Does this make me feel good after I do this? And so then they don't ever have, and then it becomes squashed into the shadow, where now it's a taboo. Now it's a deep underground, you know, it gets into the like sexual debauchery. So I think that's a big problem that we have in the culture that is working itself out as more people coach, do different types of relationship coaching, do different types of therapeutic work, spiritual work, where I think we are changing from the inside out. I think what would be nice is to kind of say what you think patriarchy is and what I think it is, so that we can maybe give listeners a little bit of a list. And some of the things I'm going to mention are power over, domination, feeling diminished by other people's success is a big symptom of being in a patriarchal mindset or attitude. The narcissism, for sure, really about self-focus and doing for self rather than doing for the whole and humanity. It doesn't mean that we don't come first and we don't, you know, do for ourselves. Also, one of the big things is really that seeing everybody else as a threat, that competition that's not healthy competition, but seeing everyone else as a threat, and literally only the patriarchy tends to only be really concerned with self-concept, self-gratification, how it affects them. It's not about the whole. And so that's some of the things that I think. What's on your list of how would you define patriarchy, so listeners have a better idea of what we're talking about?
Yeah, so first, I really that something struck me about what you were saying before about the you know, the kind of sexuality experimentations and the expression and whether it's taboo and blah. So, and I wanted to say that my feeling about it, obviously, you know, I lived in Europe a lot, and I think they have quite a freer, more diverse approach to sexuality and relationships. So it's interesting that coming to States, I don't know how many years it's been, but basically probably 10 something years like that. And, you know, and before that being in Europe, in England, in France, and seeing all sorts of different relationships and thinking that's a norm. So there was not really that kind of it's a taboo. It's like it's just another thing. And I think Americans, from my perspective, as it's been, yes, maybe that patriarchy you're talking about is that kind of puritanism, or some kind of like a message out there that is just one-sided. This is the one sort of what is it? One thing fits all. It's like this is how a relationship needs to be. And I think as with Me Too movement, I wonder if it was happening before that. I just don't know. I wasn't really paying attention. But I think what is happening now is like a chaos. It's like when when in 60s, when we had the birth control, right? That suddenly everybody's trying everything, and we want to be anything just in case, so we're not missing out, because we don't really know, right? And myself coming from Europe,
discovery.
And they're really not thinking that this is something forbidden. It's not a forbidden fruit. It's like whatever sexuality, right. do it all, right? So to me, I'm just looking at a kind of a post-restriction, maybe post-patriarchy, or patriarchy dismantling sort of a landscape where everybody, men and women, are trying to survive this kind of a mess, and trying to find something new, and nobody really knows where they're supposed to go. So I think a lot of things are not necessarily taboo, not anymore. I don't think polyamorous relationship, I think this is like so well known everywhere else, but it's like but people are experiencing it, and they often feel kind of lost. I feel like, knowing from speaking with girls and boys, especially newer younger generation, right? It's a kind of a exploratory phase after when the ideal was when ideal was taken away, right? It's like like when I'm talking about post sort of the 90s world of Soviet Russia, when the empire collapsed and people are like, oh, we don't have anything to hold on to, so we're going to try anything. And a lot of it, people are dipping into their own shadows, what you said, shadows, right? So it's like you don't even know what's there. I love shadow. I love shadow work. I like definitely, that's my lifestyle, is to be very integrated and to have both in my lives, and just like really express as much as possible of my shadow. But I can see that when there's a hunger, when there's so much restrictions that been on you, and talking about patriarchy, I think patriarchy is not about restricting natural flow of something that threatens you. And let's say if the patriarchy, which is not matriarchy, it's patriarchy, so it's about I'm being I want to dominate women, right? Because we had matriarchy as well in this civilization, I'm sure, right? So then it was other way around, right? So, but patriarchy is about I'm threatened by this woman like flow energy, and I'm going to restrict it, and I'm going to repress it because I'm afraid of it. And I think this is interesting, because this is another thing, your question about what am I kind of coming across of when I'm speaking with men. They are afraid of their own feminine. They don't know how to really be in it, express it, though I think I mentioned that majority of men that I work with are very successful, though they definitely have masculine traits, but they also, obviously working with me, they had to have some sense to come to work with me. That means they're also quite spiritual and quite open and very sensitive. So maybe they're not normal men out there. Those are a bit more evolved men that I work with, but even from them, I hear how they were suffering through the childhood, with being told all of those things you said. Don't cry, this is weak, emotions, just forget it, push through,
right?
Don't be don't be a pussy, or whatever they say. It's like they had that messaging, and the fact that they even have any kind of sensitive side to them is kind of a miracle. And typically they would have it through experiences of trauma, having that compassion, because I think when you hit in beat in your life, you can't help it, you soften. Some people toughen up, maybe women toughen up, but men, they soften because they understand they're not indestructible. They understand there's more to everything, more to life than just reaching for whatever success
You
is.
hope so. I think that the challenge, the pain, loss, and challenge is what brings us into that place of humility. And like you said, realizing that we are we're not indestructible, and we can be broken down to the nub. It's kind of like Kipling's If, can you stoop them up and build them up with worn out tools when everything crumbles? And that doesn't mean anything about your self-image or your self-concept. But I think that patriarchy tries to uphold a self-concept that is all powerful beyond that, beyond, it has no humility, it has no compassion, it has no ability. And yeah, I mean, it's funny where women tend to identify 14 emotions and men 7, and there is hundreds of emotions. That's what I work a lot with in my work, because we want to work with the mind so much, but it's the emotion. You just release the emotion and the mind unravels. And I think it's really beautiful that you're being able to deal with men that want to open up to that, but that's big work. And like you said, it's like they've never had any experiences where there's been space and grace for that to be okay. And then on the other side, I don't think there's been any experiences for women to know that there's space and grace for their speaking to come up, of their voice, so they don't have they're not in touch or have a barometer on their own medicine, their own wisdom that they bring. And a lot of it's just rhetoric, a lot of it's just trite, or it's what they've heard in the culture, until they start speaking enough to where their wisdom finally comes up from within them, their unique voice. And so I think that's an interesting thing for men. It's like is it okay to have emotions? And then how do I do it? How do I be a masculine man having emotions? I'm sure that's a question. And then with women, how do I speak my voice but get to the good stuff?
How do I assert myself? How do I create something of value? I think that's an interesting. Yeah, I find that if I simplify it completely, and looking at the work, I mean, I'm sure it's not just me, but it's I think maybe generalization, and I'm sure there are variations of that. But generally, I feel like men typically need to add a flow, creative flow, and that kind of intuitive flow into their life. And women need to add discipline and order, because without, and kind of like my kind of feeling and personal experience had showed me that having not balance, I don't like the word balance of masculine and feminine. I like the activation of both. Activation of masculine and feminine is something to really work on and thrive for, because I think I myself, I'm a very feminine woman, always been very intuitive, very sort of like flowy and creative since childhood. But before I added some masculine traits to it, which was really, I would say a hard work for me, because I'm such a sort of say free spirit. Like I hate restriction. I'm sure I have problems with authority.
Oh, and that's because you're Pisces, right?
Pisces, I mean,
yeah.
Bring it on. Like I have,
you understand the
if you can. It's a catch me if you can situation. It's like, so I and through obviously doing a lot of psychoanalysis and therapy, I know that, of course, daddy issues, having powerful, famous father, it's kind of comes with the territory. So I always had, I've been a rebel my whole life. I've been I didn't want to be constricted to anything and feel very sensitive and triggered by any kind of, rules or regulations.
Yeah.
But ultimately, to succeed in my own life, and especially in my own business, I would say maybe business had been the playground for me to learn all of those things and integrate my shadow side, which I'm sure, as you would know if you know about shadow work, that whatever there's outside, out there, inside, there's something hidden. It's pretty much the opposite. So I've let my the shadow sort of much more, I would say, assertive masculine confident side to come to play. And I gave her space and I cultivated her. And when I'm looking at what is it really, what is it that I can describe my personal masculine with, I would describe it with practice and discipline rather than some kind of even assertiveness, because I feel, you know, like the voice you're talking about, right? Like you said, when you speak a lot, it's suddenly you know, after all that blah 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 and all that fluff that you hear, something true comes out that is yours. It takes time, but it takes that practice. It doesn't come out in the first time, perhaps, right? Maybe you need to practice. And I feel that's a very masculine trait, like I personally feel for myself, when I love to just do things I love without having any kind of like specific accountability or agenda, while being bringing my masculine in means no, have an agenda, have a purpose in life, have a point to it. There's a point to anything that I'm doing, and then practice it. Don't give up if it's not like coming out perfect first time. Just keep at it. That kind of determination. Maybe it's very Taurian, as your Taurus as well. You know, we are kind of determined. So I naturally or not naturally, I think I woken up to my that kind of determination much later in my life. I had passion, but I didn't have consistency. And when you marry those two together, passion and consistency, I think you can really see that activation of masculine and feminine, that dance that actually creates something of you know, worthy of attention of other people or even yourself, like just to enjoy.
Yeah, I think that it's interesting how people are conflating what we do with the masculine and feminine, and conflating, well, the male mows the lawn and fixes the car and the woman, you know, does the kids. And I think people are conflating like, oh, well, I'm in my masculine because I'm active and I'm doing, but I think that it's way deeper than that. And I think that this is an interesting thing that's going on. And there's some evolutionary, people are kind of mixing and conflating evolutionary terms of male female dynamics with masculine feminine. And I think that's an interesting dynamic. It's this creation principle, and it's this mental principle, and it's really beautiful what you're talking about bringing in these two sides of yourself and that activation versus balance. I don't believe in balance either. I don't think that you can absolutely get balance. You know, brush my teeth as long as I sleep. There's just no balance. It doesn't exist. I think that it's actually an inner state, right? It's an inner state versus something that you can acquire outside of you by managing your schedule in a certain way.
They're both pronounced. You're putting energy into both of them, comparing to trying to tone it down, because you know, as being very intuitive, very, you know, and if that is feminine, so a very feminine woman, I certainly don't want to lose that and don't be, let's say, business-like at expense of my creativity. No way. I think I am the most powerful when I put those two together and have a creative business that I have. I think this is it. This is the best. That's what I call activation. It's not like I'm balancing it, because if my masculine is not that pronounced, then I'm not going to dim down my feminine to be balanced. No way. No, I'm just going to bring up my masculine. I'm going to learn it. At least this is what I did. I had to learn. I had to find myself role models. I had to look for women. Who are the women who have activated masculine as well as feminine, and who are happy in life? Because I don't want to learn from somebody who is, you know, shouting about this, but then they don't like the business, but they don't have love in their life. They don't have any, you know, family, like all of those things that I think. I have 5 daughters. I mean, I would not have that. So if it's not this or that, it's both. I want to be, you know, I'm a businesswoman. I love doing my own thing. I'm, you know, fiercely independent in my thinking and in my doing, but I also love my kids. I also so happy that I experienced, you know, giving birth to human beings and bringing them up, and all those worries that come with it. And it's just a very kind of a, I would say, kind of a trivial sort of thing, that it doesn't give you glory, you know, doesn't give you a badge of or awards, but it's just
Right.
it's what also being woman is like. So I'm so I wouldn't like give up on any of that, you see. And I think both
Absolutely.
takes a lot of work. I mean,
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's interesting if you bring astrology in, you have Virgo, which you're talking about, that Virgo being organized, executing a plan. That's Virgo, but it's a feminine sign. Cancer is a feminine sign, but
yeah,
yet
my
a
business is
Cancer is
actually
all
Capricorn. My business is Capricorn. I don't have much Virgo, but I do have that Capricorn there. And when I'm looking at myself in business, I was always shocked how can I be so consistent and so organized and systematic in my business, while in my life I am like I'm just flowing all over the place. Like I love being in a flow, but it's
right.
because my my sort of business, my work is like literally on Capricorn. So I
But
think
what
when
I'm talking about though is
Capricorn,
just like, right. And but the thing is, what I'm saying is that we all have all 12 signs, right? We're all always working with all 12 signs. So what I'm meaning is that Virgo is of the zodiac, it's that execution and that detail and that precision and scheduling out. So what I think is interesting is that it's a feminine sign.
it
And then
is,
you have, and then
because
you have,
I'm not very like I hate scheduling. I don't have a schedule in it. So I don't have that.
and then
Virgo is maybe of my maybe the
yeah, I'm not talking about you. I'm just saying like if we're talking about the
gender.
masculine and feminine, yeah, in general. If you're talking about the masculine and feminine, because you were talking about how you had to pull in and learn this masculine side of yourself to be
Yeah,
disciplined and determined. And I felt like that was such a beautiful example for everyone, divine feminine soulpreneurs out there listening, that Virgo is actually feminine though, and that Cancer is feminine. Obviously, that Cancer sign, the mother, the nurturing, but it's a cardinal sign of action. And I think that this is another thing that gets conflated with the masculine, feminine ideas is that it's masculine's conflated with action and feminine's conflated with the passive. But the feminine gets up, gets the kids done, gets them in the schedule, gets them to school, gets all the doctor's appointments and teeth, and knows the different milestones and the moments, and they're just never stop, all of the educational and the engagement and on the floor. You have to be so present as with the
yeah.
child. And that's that. And it's like, what do you think a woman's doing with all these kids and all the things that they're getting done in the home and the meals and when to do it in the right time? And this kid doesn't want to eat that. And so I think it's such a misunderstanding of the masculine feminine principles when we conflate masculine with action. They both have action. They take action in a different way. I think there's a linear and a non-linear. I think it's so amazing to have these conversations and keep pulling it apart of what the masculine feminine is. And I think one of the main things is to like start really working with the damaged masculine, the wounded feminine, and healing. And I love your example of having to curate your own masculine energy, and the way that you described it is very beautiful. I think it's an excellent example for soulpreneurs. What do you think about that? How action is often conflated with the masculine principle only? Because the feminine principle, my God, we take action. I don't think we take action in the same way.
I never thought of that. I didn't think that. I think there's a feminine action and then there's a masculine action, just like you're
It's more
saying.
intuitive. It's coming
It's
from
just
that
more
right brain
intuitive. Yeah,
intuition of
yeah.
knowing. We just know. We know when the meal needs to be cooked.
We
We know when the
know.
baby's crying. We know when the
Yeah,
baby needs a burp
feel.
or needs a
We
nap.
know. We
Yeah.
feel. We feel. I think it's interesting. Yeah, I think maybe if I wanted to make a distinction here, I would say probably. As again looking at myself, but also speaking with women who are very intuitive, is that I find that it's when you are feminine, you're not so, let's say, you're not so driven by competition. You're not competing with God. You're not competing with divine. You are okay with taking guidance from your soul, from your whatever something comes. Like, and I actually tagged you on my dream today. I was putting out there, right? So the dreams, when the dreams come, I take them very seriously. Dreams is what informs my whole day, my whole life, sometimes maybe some decades sometimes of my life, because I see
it's Jung's work that brought dreams to us, and he was a astrologer. Yeah, absolutely.
And that is very much a feminine approach. And when I'm thinking of masculine, I'm thinking it's the same action, but informed by, well, I made the decision. I am the authority here. It's not God. It's not nothing told me. I own it. I take that responsibility, and I think maybe this is where we are, coming back to that control versus power. So both have power, but I wonder if, I wonder if, striving for control, because I love word control, and so much coaching I do with women who are typically not very successful in business is about, first of all, and in my own meditation, I had that to gain control and then surrender. Don't start surrendering before you achieved anything, because it's like you're a mess. Figure it out first, get a grip, organize. Once you did that, it's a good time to sort of surrender now to the flow. But also, I think maybe this is when the wounded feminine, and this is what I experienced myself as well, why I loved business so much, because it gave me opportunity to be in control. It gave me opportunity to have a grip on everything, and just kind of like a very Virgo. That's why Virgo, I'm kind of get very triggered, because I know that feeling of trying to or at least I've been told by, obviously this is the typical business training. You have to schedule, you have to do it. And I was like, oh my God, okay, because it's very soothing for your anxiety. And if a woman is anxious, she's gonna hold on to those, I would say, questionable tactics, and try to control everything. And it's ultimately makes you play small, because you can control anything that is not basically very mediocre out there. Once you really want to play big and you want to come out of your comfort zone, there's nothing you can control. You have to surrender. You have to take risks. You have to be now brave, courageous, which is, sort of go out there, wander, explore, experiment, see what happens.
Experiment.
And have that faith, have that courage, and also trust your intuition and trust your spirit, that and your guidance, that you can survive that, and that you're not going to die of anxiety in a process, which is like a complex thing there, right? And it's always a dance of masculine and feminine out there once you come out of your comfort zone, if you want.
I think that's another part of the patriarchy.
Like, but controlling issues, this is the part of patriarchy. I feel like when, let's say, this abstract patriarchy is afraid of feminine and unruliness and the vastness and depth of it, that let's just constrain it, let's just schedule it, let's just tell it what it's supposed to be, right? So I don't have to be now threatened. But ultimately we are arriving to very mediocre existence. If feminine is restricted, we are literally getting a world. Yes, you got the world you can control. I think we're living it right now. You got the world you can control. And when you controlled it, what do we have?
They don't care, but the patriarchy doesn't care.
We have that whole thing that is like a literal, like a top of what they could do when we have restricted world.
Right. Control. And I think that's the thing, is that most people don't realize that it's
wow. And I think when you're saying about the rise of feminine, I think this is the rise of feminine, to understand that this is how far our patriarchy got us. We can see it. This is it. So now
we know that already.
Let's break it. But it's been like so obvious. I think those 2 years, I feel like the most depressive sort of for myself, because I just hate that state of not being able to do and fly free and be myself. And I'm feeling, oh, okay, this is what hopefully we're gonna learn that lesson of don't restrict the freedom of thinking, don't restrict the freedom of the flow.
But see, that's what we're up against. I think that's what people don't know, is that during goddess culture times, it wasn't matriarchy, it wasn't women dominating men. So there's this real misunderstanding about matriarchy, that women are dominating men, but that's not what divine feminine's about. It's about the divine feminine and masculine coming together, unifying together. But during the goddess culture times, it was actually an egalitarian culture that just revered the goddess as their deity. And of course, you know, deities don't exist, whatever. But what people don't know is that paved roads, indoor plumbing, and architecture all came from that period when fear was nearly eradicated. There was no war, there was peace, and it was a time where women were respected, revered, honored, and there was egalitarian society. You know, there was equality between men and women. What people don't realize is that the only technology we've invented, mostly, obviously there's a percentage, but mostly over these last 5,000 years of patriarchy, is more sophisticated ways to kill, more destruction. You know, the technology has all been about the advancement of the patriarchy and destruction. And so what you're saying is, I think people have now been able to see and wake up to what we were never taught. It was kind of hidden. We're brainwashed to think in this destination focus, which it's funny because I don't think the patriarchy works that way. They go out there, they experiment, they just create, we're going to put an oil pump here, and we're just going to find out what happens over here. But they teach it's socialized in the culture to get to this destination, and you have to have it look this way. So it's this weird thing, this industrial era paradigm. And we're in different countries and have different experiences. I think it's interesting us coming together, speaking about the narratives that have been existing in our respective areas of the world, because there's a lot of regression and repression in the United States. People think it's so liberal, and it's so, and not liberal politically, liberal as in ideas and information and, you know, and all that, but, and value systems. But people think it's so advanced, but it's really has a regression in so many ways. We have been regressed in society. We have not advanced forward as a species, as humanity. And I think what you're saying is really important for people to wake up to, that we would be light years from where we are right now if we didn't have this few people in power trying to control and dominate. And it's all men, women, whomever. It's not just women. It's men. It's all of us are under this. And I think that's interesting about the intuitive action versus the male, like creative action. And women don't often know to get out there in the world and to experiment, try things, then get the data and see what happens. I think a lot of people don't know that that's just business. It's a part of business. We have to do that. And what you said about capturing the feminine and like trying to schedule her, I don't work in the schedule that way. I cannot.
No.
Yeah, it channels through when it comes through, and that's when we do it. Like stop, drop, and create.
Yeah, practice,
not.
Yeah. Consistency, determination, yes, but but out of passion, not out of like, you know, I think I grew up as
not out of have to.
I grew up as a mom who was like very you know, obviously, bless her heart, dealing with her own a lot of anxiety, you know, and life was hard. She was a single mom. So it was like a lot of regimented sort of scheduling. And I was like, I can't, like, this is like against spiritual abuse. That's how I called it. I was really suffering with that. So as soon as
especially with being a Pisces, absolutely.
I was like, whoa, like there's a whole, so maybe I'm allergic a little bit to that, but so I'm like really bad at, it's not like I'm bad at scheduling, I just don't think that that's the way to go.
It's not the way you work and function. Yeah, where a Virgo would very much function that way. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
But with time, I've certainly, you know, definitely learning some of the practicalities. You know, I think Virgo is a very practical sign, a lot about health, a lot about like those little things you do for yourself.
All the precise little details.
Yeah, precise little details. So I sometimes life forces you to kind of start paying attention to that. So then I do.
Yeah. Well, tell us about what you do, how people can find you if they want to look at your material. What is your big project right now? Tell us about this, because you have a new project in the works.
Thank you.
Or that is happening.
So lots of different projects. I mean, I'm working on, obviously, right now, there's a meaningful trends out there.
And tell us what this is, if somebody doesn't know what it is.
Yeah. Meaningful Trends is my new project, and it's about bringing hope to people through looking into the future. So
is it a radio show? Is it a place where they listen? Is it audio? Is it video? Like, what is it?
Channel. It's a channel with interviews. It's actually on lirakay.com on my website.
Okay.
But also it is on all the social media, and I'm interviewing lots of celebrities. I'm into creating panels with people where we go and discuss things, and mainly looking into 2050, looking into, you know, sort of 30 years ahead and imagining what future would look like. And in 2010, I did a project similar. It was called Future Proof. And I was asking mainly artists at the time, and you know, all over the world, and lots of, I don't know, hundreds of artists participated. And the vision of the future was really grim, was very apocalyptic. And so this time, when I was asking question like that, I was already like predicting that we might have a lot of kind of darkness again. And I was like, well, there's enough darkness. I feel like we at the time lived in a kind of post-apocalyptic world. I was like, let's look into something that is hopeful. Let's just freaking do it. Let's create it. Let's imagine a better future. So that's what meaningful trends is that we are creating with our meaning. We are creating with, we speak out, just like you said, we speak it and we create it. And then the next question is the awesome Virgo question, very practical. So what should we do? What should we do now to be able to actually live there? Because we don't want utopia. We want something that we, with every action we take, with every intention we put out there, actually we're gonna bring it to reality. So this is the meaningful trends, and of course there's all sorts of other projects. So you can, I would recommend to go to lirakay.com and just go on my website.
Perfect. Well, people can find you there at lirakay.com. I love what your project is about. It's about us imagining the future in a positive way, the vision, because so many people are spelled into imagining doom and gloom, and it's projected by the patriarchy and to scare people so they're controllable and that fear. And so I love what your project's about. Imagine the future, but also create it and live it now. And you're bringing on all of these people that can speak to this. So this is an amazing project. You have to go take a look at Lira's work. I'm Jude Hotep. thegoddessastrologer.com is where you can find me, and on the YouTube channel every day there's daily astrology. So it's been amazing having this discussion. I think we brought so many topics that we could probably do an hour on just individually, but I think we brought a lot of information forward, a lot of consciousness, status quo breaking, breaking the status quo up. So really love this talk with you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.